Good evening, everyone, and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to yet another live stream. This week has been another another fun one, right? We are definitely living in the worst possible timeline that we could have expected, and on top of everything that's happening in the world right now, in our little corner of society, this place we call Occulture, there's been some very nasty drama unfolding. If you're here, likely you know exactly why I'm doing this live stream, but maybe you don't know it, and then I'll try to guide you through it. At least give you my perspective on whatever's happening. And I decided to speak about this because first of all, I care about this little corner of society. It's something that has been part of my life for almost 3 decades now, and it's something that I lived and breathed, especially in the last decade. Once again, some of you will know me before and know that I had a period of time where I was living as a musician, as a touring musician. That was my job. It's lasted 15 years. And while I was also a practicing occultist, a magician, whatever you want to call it, my music was my main scene. That life came to an end, and then I decided, that's my other passion. I'm going to deep dive into that other passion of mine. So, what we're going to talk tonight is, I decided to call this stream The Last Witch Hunt, which obviously echoes Peter Gray's blog post on Scarlet Imprint's website called The Latest Witch Hunt. The latest implies, a series. This is just the latest. There's going to be another one, in a month of time, 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, I don't know. For me, I want this to be the last in the sense that I want to completely disconnect from this kind of interactions, at least for as long as it's going to be possible for me. I tend to be very opinionated, and I like to be very opinionated. It's who I am. It's my true will, somebody would say. Still, I decided it's time to let go of interacting with a lot of bad faith actors. I've been called a bad faith actor myself, and we'll see it shortly. But I decided this is going to be the last witch hunt, and at least for me. And I also, the subtitle of this little stream is How Occulture Ends, because I also feel that we reached a point of no return here. We reached a point where the illusion of community has been shattered once and forever. We reached a point whereby all the little coming togethers that I observed in the last 2 years since the pandemic hit, and since we start feeling the lockdowns and going into a more communal space, virtual but communal, I feel it's completely gone. There are many reasons for that. Main reason is that everybody's tired. Everybody is traumatized. Everybody is living, again, as I said at the beginning, to possibly the worst timeline we could imagine. This is a time where ideally communities should come together. What's been happening is the opposite, because I think that there weren't real good foundations for that. One of the points of Peter Gray's The Latest Witch Hunt blog post was really about this call for unity. My friend Phil Hines said that usually these calls for unities are done by those who seek to silence dissension and silence different points of view. And I am afraid that not only he is right, I'm also afraid that in order for us to eventually imagine a strong community, we really need to iron out all the dissension that's between us, even if it means to accept that there's no way for some elements to collaborate any further. So, why are we even here? What is the starting point of this ongoing the problem, discussion, drama, whatever you want to call it? Around 1 year ago, well, just slightly more than 1 year ago, in January of 2021, I was shown some by a friend of mine. I was shown some very damning screenshots from Gordon White's private members presentation called The Vertical Line. By the way, I will tell you about various things you can go and check out. For instance, like this vertical line presentation is linked in my Twitter thread that I link below. And there's going to be a lot of other links for you. Pretty much, if you really want to have a full understanding of what's happening, you should read all the links. It's going to take a while, but it's going to really give you the whole scope. And I see somebody saying that they are unaware of any drama. They stay away from Twitter. This actually maybe it's good for your mental health. That's definitely something I'm going to do with. I'm going to take a little break from social media. But unfortunately, closing your eyes and staying away from the place where you might be exposed to problems doesn't mean that those problems aren't there. And the problems really were, like I said, going back to January 2021, when I was exposed to, sent these screenshots, were by Gordon White, that some of you might be aware of, an author that came to prominence in the 2010s with various books, Chaos Protocols possibly being his most famous book of his beginning ones at least, and then Starships, and then he started a very popular podcast, Rune Soup. And Gordon White started as a chaos magician and transitioned into some sort of like socio-political commentator with an occult slant, with an esoteric perspective on things, right? Well, what Gordon White was advocating in this private members, so not something that was public, it was something you had to pay to watch it, pretty much telling everybody that the COVID pandemic was a hoax. Everything was socially engineered by the government in order to enforce the population, that everybody was speaking about COVID was likely lying, and that nurses and doctors, that were actually enforcing this Great Reset agenda, were to be sent pretty much to the firing squad. There's some very heavy rhetoric that he puts forward in his vertical line presentation. Now, this is not the first time that Gordon White exposed this very radical or fringe, as somebody say today on Facebook, ideas. He did start as a chaos magic author, but over the years, he really did transition more and more into more, conspiracy theorist, really. As to why, maybe we'll get to it at the end of this. I have some notes, so I'm going to switch to the notes right now because I really need to remind. It's going to be a little bit longer than the usual tonight. So that's when I took a problem with that because at the time I just recovered from COVID, and I stated many times, I'm going to say it again, COVID for me has been very real. It's been the worst illness I've ever had to suffer through. And it was something that really impacted me physically, mentally, and psychologically. I do believe that the stress of lockdowns and COVID brought the end of my previous relationship. it really put a lot of strain on myself, and it put a lot of strain on many other people, people that I know directly, not hearsay, not reading on the mainstream media or other buzzwords. I knew of these people. Remember, this is January 2021. We didn't have the vaccine, which, by the way, in time, Gordon White would go and say that the vaccine is an hoax as well. We didn't have the vaccine. We didn't know. I didn't when I caught it. I didn't know if I would survive, and there were moments where I was really thinking that I would not have made it. Now, at the same time, I was also trying to organize a conference in Glastonbury here in the UK, where I was living at the time. This conference was called AvalonCon, and eventually I had to cancel it some months later because of COVID restrictions and the impossibility for it to run. Two of the speakers that were down to be at my conference were Peter Gray and Alkistis Dimek of Scarlet Imprint. And that's because Peter and Alkistis, while I cannot really say they were my good friends, they were definitely very good acquaintances and two people that I really respected their work. I really thought that, with Scarlet Imprint, they brought breath of fresh air, especially in British culture, but also worldwide, of course. They didn't shy away from trying to modernize the discourse around magic. And just to give you an idea, this is the first edition of The Red Goddess, the big one. The one that goes for a lot of money, actually, as well. I bought it on the 7th of July of 2007. And that's when I first started, corresponding with Peter and Alkistis. And then eventually I went up and organized several of their events when I was working at Treadwell's bookshop in London. And over the years, I supported them. I supported Peter specifically in at least two previous drama that he was involved with. In 2011, he was accused of being a Nazi. And in 2016, he was accused of being a transphobe and various other things. Both times, we're talking 2011, we're talking like a long time, right? We're talking a decade right here. So just to give you an idea how long I go back in my relationship of, I would say, friendship, maybe not close friendship, but friendship with them. I took their part. I was defending Peter because I really thought that the accusation moved against him were too far-reaching, right? Were like, that wasn't the person I knew him to be. I knew him to be like as a serious occultist, a serious devotee of Babylon, a serious explorer of some maybe more extreme side of magic, but it's the same kind of magic I like. So, he had a passion for BDSM. I have a passion for BDSM. And so for me, seeing people making fun of it or using his passion for BDSM as a way to demonize him seemed not only wrong, not only stupid, but actually wrong. So when I was very surprised when Peter and Alkistis told me that they had to pull off of my conference because of their support to Gordon White. They could not accept that I was actually taking a very solid stand against Gordon White. Because what I did is that I went to Twitter and I actually tweeted at him and asked him to explain himself. Crickets. He never replied. In fact, other people started to ask questions, including Michael M. Hughes, which you will know from buying Trump or Hex Putin right now, global neo-pagan activism. And again, no reply from Gordon White ever. In fact, what started to happen was noticing that a good number of Gordon White's followers, and you can find them on Twitter or on Instagram by the hashtag RSPM, Rune Soup Private Member, they would come out in droves and start to harass everybody who dare speak ill of the master. If you're getting the impression that Gordon White runs a cult, you're absolutely right. It's Cult 101 in all its finer details. It's almost like he's read the book and is putting it out as it's written. So, and again, I need to go to the thing. So basically, I never once questioned Peter Gray or Alcestis. Alcestis, I mean, I'm not talking about her because she has not been really part of this debacle. But I never questioned Peter Gray in his decision to, pull off my conference, and I just stayed silent about it. When people ask me, why did they leave? Why didn't they join? So, well, problems of various kind. I try to be as professional as possible. So what happens this year is that on February 24th, pretty much on the day of the invasion of Ukraine by part of Russia, both Peter Gray and, Gordon White released a new video called We Are the Witchcraft, and Peter Gray was guest on it. Now, lo and behold, they're talking about two things that really made me react. First, the fact that they were around the 58th minute, yes. Peter Gray says something that we live in an infinitely more restrictive society than the one Jack Parson was fighting against it. And this sounded weird to me, but I didn't clock it. I will come back to it. What I really reacted to was the closing remarks by Peter Gray, with Gordon White smugly and sagely nodding, where he said that in this day and age, words like fascist or Nazi or transphobe or white supremacist are just thrown around so that they don't mean anything anymore. And in fact, what we should do as members of this witchcraft, we should all come together and work together, even with those people that we think of fascist, Nazis and whatnot, in order to overcome what is to come. And what is to come is Peter's vision of absolute collapse of society. If you read Apocalyptic Witchcraft, he wrote about it. He wrote about it 10 years ago. I mean, that's when Apocalyptic Witchcraft first came out. And that's his vision. It's the fact that society is collapsing, and something else will come around, but there's going to be a period of tribulation. And so we shouldn't stop with all this identity politics. We should actually come together. Now, for me, that was a big yikes, because when I left the OTO, I left it because that was exactly the narrative of people like James Wasserman and his cohorts, his lapdogs, that were telling people in the OTO that we should just be accepting of Trump supporters. We should just be accepting of people that were going around spouting fascist or Nazi rhetoric or white supremacist rhetoric. We should just be accepting of people hiding behind the idea of a Thelemic confederacy, like the Southern Confederacy, because in the end, what matters more is the Thelemic ideals that we all bind together. Fuck that. No, that does not exist. It does not clock, not on my watch. I have nothing to do with anyone who espouse this kind of ideas. If somebody is a Nazi, a fascist, or a transphobe, or a white supremacist, fuck you. And I hope it's clear, right? I hope it's getting I'm transmitting the anger, because I don't give a shit if these fucking idiots think of themselves as Thelemites. They're not on my team. And if society collapses, well, I will have to defend myself from whoever is there and these monsters. They're the one and the same to me. Now, this reaction of mine, alongside the reaction of plenty of others, this really just to give you an idea, this video really generated a lot of reaction. Some of it was against my on the same terms as mine. Some were actually really reacting to that previous phrase that I mentioned. And again, I didn't clock it at first because I am a cis hetero male, white person of upper middle class upbringing. And so for me, when I read something that we live in an infinitely more restrictive society than what Jack Parsons was fighting against, I didn't immediately clock that what Peter Gray is saying there is, at least in the way it comes across, is that he is mentioning that the Americas in the 40s and the 50s, it's less restrictive than America today. Tell that to a person of color. Tell that to a Latino. Tell that to anybody who's not white. Tell that to anybody who's not white and middle class. It's atrocious bullshit. And there's been a lot of people that rightfully reacted badly to this. There's a lot of queer people that were like, fuck you, Peter Gray. Like, you don't get to talk to this because you are a middle-aged white man living in Cornwall that doesn't have any problems. And I say living in Cornwall because you will see that one of the issues that we're having with Peter Gray, one of the issues we're having with Gordon White, and one of the issues that we have with yet another person, Red Wildermouth, is that all people that went and live outside of society, or at least on the fringes. This idea of leaving the cities and going into the wilderness. Well, it's good for you. Good that you can afford it, first of all, and good that you can live in the delusion that you really are leaving society behind, while still using the internet, while still even selling books. Anyway, the reason that Peter Gray ended up and penned his reaction blog, and Gordon White as well, we'll get to Gordon White in a second, is that they were reacting about the fact that people like me called them a fascist. I'm not a fascist. I'm not a Nazi. How do you dare saying this thing? I received an email from him. I'm not sharing it because, of course, it's private, but he pretty much told me that he could not recognize in me anything Thelemic anymore. Because what about Liber Oz? What about man has the right to speak as he will? Apart from the fact that maybe I should do like a live stream on here on how much I think the Liber Oz is Crowley at its worst, and how much Liber Oz is Crowley's idea of synthesizing the OTO plan for social reform in words of one syllable, which is ridiculous if you think about it, like many things Crowley did. But that implies that Liber Oz works in an OTO-like society. We don't have an OTO-like society. The OTO doesn't exist, really. So let's not discuss Liber Oz. Let's use it as use it as a good utopia, but it's not really. We're not enacting it. We can't. So man has the right to say what he will and bear the brunt of the reactions of what he says, always and forever. So, if you read Peter Gray's reaction, it's all about, non serviam. I shall not submit. I guess that Peter is really playing Lucifer, in anticipation of this much-awaited second part of his Lucifer series, and is really getting into the idea that he will not back down. He will just keep going with his aura of superiority, that he doesn't serve anybody. It would be so easy for him to just say, folks, sorry, I fucked up. Maybe you're reading it too much into what I was saying there. I'm sorry, it came out a little bit too strong. But of course not. Because at the end of the day, Peter Gray is there to sell you books and to sell you his persona. This is not the big issue here. And sorry, I told you, today's going to be a bit longer than the usual. The big issue is not Peter Gray. I really don't think Peter Gray is a fascist. I really don't think Peter Gray is a Nazi. I even said it in one of my, in my original Twitter thread. Said it very loudly. There's a lot of people, again, those especially from the queer community, that really got angry at him, that have been inferring that, for instance, Scarlet Imprint's old logo really looks like the swastika. I'm sorry, I don't see it. And I don't know Peter to be a Nazi or a fascist. I know Peter to be an edgelord. Everybody in the UK knows him to be a edgelord. That's why maybe he moved away from the cities and went to live somewhere else, because he didn't have much friends in London. Then again, I have to be honest here. Nobody really has friends in London, because this city really is about facades and not much else. I guess anybody who lives in LA will know what I mean. It's kind of the same. The problem really is not this. And again, if you go on Facebook and you can read Jason Miller's charitable reading, and he put it online publicly, and you can read it. And he starts by saying that he's choosing to believe that Peter Gray and Gordon White were referring to people who were not actually fascist, transphobes, or white supremacy, and maybe have been called that by overzealous folks fighting against bigotry. This doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And he makes the point that maybe in our social media discourse, we tend to overdo. I do it. I know I'm culpable of that. I made that error many times of being overzealous, but because I am really fucking committed to fight against what I perceive to be bigotry. Jason Miller ends that by saying that while overreach happens and cancel culture is real, in my opinion, it's a lot better to have a few people overreach than it is to just ignore bigotry that has been getting a pass for pretty much all of human history. And so, even the most charitable reading of Peter Gray and Gordon White's exchange of the words, still pretty terrible. And I agree with it. As I said, the problem here is not Peter Gray. I might have lost a friend, again, not a close friend, but somebody that I really admired and respect his work. The problem is Gordon White, which honestly I never cared for. And over the last year, I realized how dangerous this person is. Gordon White not only has a history of weaponizing followers. Up until like a few days ago, one of his followers sent up a slanderous comments to my girlfriend's on Instagram, whereby telling her to be aware of my drug addiction, which it's not existing, and the fact that I'm a sex pest. I'm not the only one who's been targeted by #RSPM. I know a lot of people that have been constantly targeted by Gordon White's cult. So he has a history of having a cult, of weaponizing the cult. But it's also, since the late 2010s, I would say 2018 maybe a bit earlier, in fact, he's been pivoting more and more away from Chaos Magick, or even his animistic view of the world, as he calls it, more and more into ultra far right or alt-right talking points. Again, in the link below, you can find Corey's Twitter analysis of how Gordon White manipulates data using far-right sources. Because, of course, he penned another blog called Enough is Enough, where he paints me, Michael Hughes, and of all people, that darling, as some of his most vile bullies. But then he goes on and pretty much repeats all the talking points of that private vertical line presentation, minus putting, the doctors and the nurses to the wall. But he pretty much all the conspiracy theories about coronavirus and the war, because of course he also speaks about the war right now. He puts it there into his blog. And what's funny is that he mentions one thing, something about John Hopkins proves that lockdowns have been been useless. Now Corey, which I didn't know her up until last week, really. She went and really. Oh, by the way, sorry if I am. I think you'll pronounce her she, her, but if not, I'm mistaken. I didn't look for it. But anyway, this person went and looked for the data, right? Like, is this link that Gordon White is proposing to his followers as truth? Is this real? Well, it turns out that these John Hopkins lockdown study was actually coming. The link itself goes to a blog platform called Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge is a far-right libertarian financial blog and news aggregator. Now, the link itself goes then on from Zero Hedge, it moves to somewhere else. It moves into Summit News. Now, Summit News is considered, its bias is considered to be extreme right, factual reporting low, and MBFC credibility rating of low. And who is behind Summit? Well, Paul Joseph Watson, which is the former editor of InfoWars. Now, I think you know where I'm going with this, right? Because it's pretty evident. Gordon White, in his retort against the bullies, just sent up some links to his, I must say, pretty ignorant following. And what the link says is that, oh, look, Gordon is right. Lockdowns didn't work. But of course, what's the source material? Well, pretty much InfoWars. So this is the pivot that I've been talking about. And this is everywhere in Gordon White's presentation, in Gordon White's offering, Gordon White's content. All it does is repeating more and more extreme far-right talking points. He is Joe Rogan without the money and without the reach of Joe Rogan. It's the same thing. He is Alex Jones without the complete, I don't know, maybe without even the charisma of Alex Jones, if you think about it. Because for as much as I fucking hate Alex Jones, he does have a lot of charisma on camera. And another thing that comes into this, I mean, one of his, on Gordon White's blog, is that he goes on a rant by saying that he cannot be a far-right sympathizer because he's a gay Jewish man. Can you think of any other gay Jewish man who used to be, I mean, proved it to be a fascist sympathizer? We have one in recent history. It's Milo Yiannopoulos. Some of you will remember him very well. A younger guy, very extreme looking, it's white, very white hair, very flamboyant. Well, gay, Jewish, Trumper. Who are all the people that have been harassing me online in the last few days? People with hashtags like I support the truckers, the trucker convoy in Canada, the same people that are tied to the extreme right. In his blog, Gordon White literally repeats the talking point that maybe we shouldn't really look too bad at the war of invasion of Russia into Ukraine, because Ukraine does have the Azov battalion. They are Nazis. And it's true. Ukraine has fighting squads that are known to be neo-Nazis. The problem is, as usual, that the world is very complex. There's a lot of things happening at the same time that I don't understand, you don't understand, but most importantly, Gordon White doesn't have the slightest clue about. What he's trying to do in order to appeal to his demographic, in order to keep selling his private membership, which at some point should have raked in quite some money. If you look at the members that were on the website and how much they sell it, well, you can make the math. Well, in order to appeal to more and more polarized and so involved demographic, well, down the rabbit hole you go. There's Brian from Fear is the Mind Killers podcast. He wrote a very good blog, again, link below, on his blog called Codex Astarte, on the possible links between a Nick Land-style accelerationism to both the position of Gordon White and of Peter Gray. I can see the similarities. I think that there's always been some level of accelerationism in Peter Gray's work, and I'm pretty sure that there's some possibility there. I haven't looked too much into it, but I really invite you to read it, to maybe see for yourself if there's something there. Because, I like to say that if it walks like a duck, it tends to be a duck. Do I mean by this that Peter Gray is a fascist? No, I don't think he is. Do I mean that he may have very extreme views? Yes, he does. Do I think that Gordon White is a fascist? I can't tell. It's pretty sure that he really repeats all the talking points of the extreme right. And it's funny because then he called me a Tory supporter, which those who know me well, you know how fucking ridiculous that is. But it's okay. Possibly because I just don't want society to collapse, right? But that's precisely what he wants. That's precisely also what Peter Gray wants. They want society to collapse, and collapse in the most violent way. That is absolutely fucking bonkers to me. All of this situation, all of this drama, kind of reminded me of the one time when I was, let's say, mid-2000s, when I realized that my passion for neo-folk music and band called like that in June was probably problematic. There is one other link. I said there's a lot of links for you to peruse. Thankfully, this link was actually was posted today again by Phil Hine, and it really made me remember when I first read this blog. And it's the story of a British journalist that realizes, and we're talking here mid-90s, that the band he loved, That in June, possibly was connected to very dodgy ideologies and very dodgy people. That was a realization that I went through myself. I still love the occasional Death Engine song. I still love the idea of apocalyptic folk. As somebody who's then went on tour and really has been enmeshed with that music scene, I can tell you without doubt. I'm going to tell you this actually. Every time you see a band playing with fascist imagery, they're not playing. All of them. I never once got to know a band that was playing with fascist imagery without being a fascist. They might not be, all out, kind of blitzkrieg kind of approach, but they all share the same ideas. So there's another angle to this. That this really feels also like almost like calculated gaslighting. It almost feels like they both recorded a podcast full of right-wing dog whistles, and it is, knowing that everybody on social media will react, and then they both claim that all of us who were responding were delusional, stupid, or worse, while they get to virtue signal that their way into more book sales. Because I remember that, lo and behold, Gordon White has a new book on Scarlet Imprint. They need to sell. Well, definitely they got the publicity stunt that possibly they were waiting for and hoping for. And I know that maybe I contributed to more sales of this book. Unfortunately, I don't care because I think it's so much more important to shed the light on how on all this situation and how maybe all the various angles that we've been looking at so far. Because if we don't do it, you will keep being a cow for these people to milk. I haven't even named the third person in this in this absolute bullshit drama that's been going on, and that's Rid Wildermouth of, and I hope I'm mentioning his name correctly. Sorry if not. This is a blogger the blog used to be called Gods and Radicals. I remember reading it years ago, and I remember even agreeing with some of the points. And then this person went more and more and more and more down the rabbit hole. Well, lo and behold, he released another blog post, which this one I didn't link because this is the truly insane one, called Black Sun Rising, that again insists that all of us, we are being brainwashed by the empire, the Western collapsing empire. We're all being brainwashed because, in fact, look, all these videos and photos of the terrible Nazis in Ukraine. And so, we are the real fascists. That's what this person says in his blog. We are the real fascists because we are the one fighting against their Promethean spirit of revolution and of renewal. I really don't know how we extricate ourselves from this. This is why I really believe that occulture, as we knew it in the last years, it's over. There is no way that we can mend this divide. I don't want to mend any divide with people like Wildermouth, because our values and our views are polar opposite. And I say that telling you that I am absolutely aware that I don't know anything about the war in Ukraine. I don't know anything about how all the geopolitical repercussions that we will all suffer through. I will tell you that I really don't know anything about what how the pandemic happened, and I don't know anything how well or how bad the pandemic reaction were. What I knew is that if you live in a society, you sign a social contract, and that removes some freedoms. That's how it works. I lose some freedom, and you lose some freedom, so that we can live together. Yes, the society is not fair. Yes, unfortunately, we lost ground in democracy over the last 75 years, really. And we really have to accept that we don't really live in true democracies anymore. We live in oligarchies of various kinds. It's so funny that we hear about the oligarchs in Russia, and we never called Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos oligarchs. What do you think they are? It's the same. I don't fool myself in thinking I'm free. But I signed a social contract, and so when lockdowns were rolled in, I complied because I didn't want somebody else to suffer from my freedom of going around without a mask. And when I was ill, I was very glad to see people in masks, and I was very glad to see people complying to lockdown rules. All of you who suffered from COVID know that no matter what we think of COVID, no matter what we think that it was been right or wrong, the reaction's been good or bad, those who suffer from it know at least the empathic value of complying with the social contract that we all signed. One final remark on the concept of war. If you saw my live stream last week, you know that I'm very tied to this war because I have friends there. One, she is now in the UK. She was able to leave. Another is still in Kiev. Night Growler is still in Kiev. Today, Michelle Belanger made a very valid point on her Twitter feed. That we know that when we see Russia stating horrible things like the assault of Mariupol's maternity hospital was staged. It's no different than what all the news we've seen for years about from the United States. All the narrative, all the spin that we had about the United States, and by default the West, NATO, war of invasion of sovereign countries. Iraq, obviously. I'm thinking of Afghanistan. I'm thinking of all these terrible wars that the West has fought. And I know, as Michel Belanger said, we were given spin. And we just turned, we averted the gaze. We looked the other way. We must do better, all of us. But I think we must do better without listening to insane conspiracy theorists that only do this in order to keep their grift going and to keep their narcissism happy. And we need to do better by keeping on speaking of all the different difficult issues, on all the difficult personalities, if needs be, that pop up in our community. If there's going to be a community, I don't know. I really don't know anymore. I hope something better is coming. A spring is coming. The equinox is coming. As I said on Patreon many times, all the respectable astrologers speak of better times ahead from April onwards. I hope so. I really don't know at this point anymore. And so, anyway, that's me. If you have any questions, tell me. You can drop them on the chat, or if not, you can contact me on social media. I will not reply for the next. I will come back on social media, possibly Monday, Tuesday. I'm definitely taking a few days away from it, but you know where to contact me if needs be, or if you have any further questions. Please look, if you really want to have the full scope of all that I told you, check all the links below. There is a lot to read. There is a lot to go into it. And please, let's do better. Let's just, my point being is that if you really believe that we live in the empire, which is such a strong term, right? And the empire never fell, as Philip K. Dick said. And we need to destroy everything and start anew. I'm pretty sure that you will come to realize that if you want to go through that crucible, well, we're already there and nothing good is coming out of it. So possibly there must be something better to do. All right. This is it. How do I stop this? There you go. Thank you for what's been here tonight. It's been a pleasure to listen to your feedback, reading your feedback actually. And I will see you soon, as usual. You know where to find me. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love and the will.